Good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock on the dot, and we're starting. People will be joining in as we proceed. So we want to start 10 dot. Um, so today we are going to be exploring a lot about security, and of course, talking about part of that subdomain of that is penetration testing. But before we start, let's have a look at what we have in store for today, so everybody know what we are doing per period. So we're going to be here for give or take 2 to 2.5 hours. Yeah. So the first thing would be just welcoming ourselves and then giving an overview of what this session is about, and then that should take roughly about 10 minutes or less. Then we'll move on into talking about the first session, which will be implementing security into our pipelines, and this is going to be taken by one and only security expert, Mr. Amin. I will introduce him later on. And so after that session, we will take questions and answers for that session. And that's the first session will take about 30 to 40 minutes. And then after that, we'll take questions. And that should be for 10 minutes. Then after that, we'll move on into product spotlight, where we would, showcase the product. And that should be 10 to 15 minutes or less. And then the second session will start. We'll have like 2 minutes break. The second session will start by 11:05, and that will take about 30 minutes to 40 minutes. It will be taken by Kenny, and then after that session, we would have questions and answers. And then after that session, we would have a networking session where we get to know one another, and then of course expand your network. And in that session also, you get to recap what has been learned in the today's session. So when you come out of that breakout session, will take about 10 minutes. So when we come out of the breakout session, it will be a time to have a fun with game. But this game is not it's just a PS, so it's going to be quiz session where we get to, all of us have, in a fun way, will participate in the quiz. So it's going to be based on groups, and then we'll have it like that. So each group will have a representative, and then representative will be the one who answers the questions on behalf of the group. At the end of the day, we'll know which group has done the best. And then we are going to have a session where we take your feedback. We have a form that we have designed. We will share it, and then we'll have a closing remark. So we don't want to take us for here for forever. We know everybody is busy. We've had a long week, and weekend is always the time that people get to use to to there's a lot of activities here. So without wasting time, we would go into the first session, which is, of course, talking about this session is meant to be handled by Mr. Bonshim Edward, but he has an emergency he had to, attend to. All right, and that's why I'm standing in for him. So the productive use session is a webinar series that we're starting the episode 1 today, and it's going to continue. Our aim for this is to really connect professionals. Have that connections, and of course see how we, from K Solutions perspective, how we can add value to the community, give back to the community. And what that we are very intentional about. This program is going to be very short, and we promise to have it really packed with values. Uh, and of course, one of the core objective is to, um, add, values to the community. Now, the first topic we are starting with is security. Security. We have backlog of topics that we are going to be picking in, and of course, we can share that with us later on. So we are starting with security, and why are we starting with security? We know what the world is right now. The world is global, and of course, I think a lot of people are waiting to be admitted. Sorry. Okay, so it's a global world, and we are living in a world that is not safe, and majority of us are practitioners. It means that we add content to the web, to the global space as well, and so of course we add to the vulnerabilities of the whole world. So it's important that us, being the professionals, know how to protect our assets. And then when you get into the web space, we have a safe word. All right. So it's in the spirit of this that we feel that one of the most important topics to handle first in this series would be the um, web security, internet security, or cyber security, as you may call it. And we have chosen professional experts to help us speak to this. Um, the first session is going to be taken by Mr. Amin Abdurazak. Mr. Amin Abdurazak, before moving to the United Kingdom, was a security professional here in Nigeria. We work closely with Mr. Amin Abdurazak for trainings and for implementations before he moved to the UK. He was one of the best here before he moved down, and then when he's there, also up his game in security, and then I have a lot of build networks, and today we want to tap into his pool of experience. Although the time we are giving him is not enough, but we want to, so within that time, whatever we can tap from him, we would do well to tap it. So if you're ready, guys, I'm ready to have Mr. Amin. So Mr. Amin, when you're ready, please let's shoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lupin. Please, can you confirm you can hear me loud and clear?
Yes, very well.
Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining. I will be sharing my screen, so just give me 1 sec. Okay, where are we sharing? Um, all right. So today, I'm sure we are all aware already of the topic of the presentation. So I will be very brief and I will go straight to the point. I have about, I think, 45 minutes for this, so I'll try to make it as fast as possible. So I think as Mr. Lukman has said, it is very important that in this modern world, especially of AI, where a lot of things are moving at a very fast pace, it is very important to ensure that as much as we enjoy building, especially building on AI technology, we also need to ensure we continuously building secure applications, secured infrastructure. And how do you keep up with this when you are building global global web applications that are a lot of organizations are pushing codes up to tens of thousands times a day, and how do you keep this thing secure? So it's become a challenge, and that is why we've decided to talk about this topic, and I hope it's going to be beneficial to everyone. So to get started, I'll walk you through what we're going to be talking about today. So I will talk about DevSecOps as a whole, and just give you an idea of what DevSecOps is all about. And then we will talk about why we need DevSecOps in today's world, and then a little bit about how we actually do these things. So how do we do DevSecOps? And then I'll walk you through some of the ways of integrating security into our development pipeline. And then I will try to do a quick demo. Hopefully, I have enough time to do that, and we would answer the question. So maybe during the demo, we would we would be answering questions because the demo might take time. I'll try to maybe build a pipeline and then see how fast we're able to do that. So enough of that. A little bit about myself. My name is Amin, as is mentioned. I have been in the security space for about 8 years now, and I am a Microsoft certified trainer. So I do a lot of training as well on the side, and I help organizations currently here in the UK develop and manage development pipelines and cloud security infrastructure. So my core area of expertise is in cloud security and application security. I am a certified DevSecOps engineer, and I am a CISSP and a CCSP. So I know a little bit of a thing or two about cloud and cloud security as a whole. And yeah, I'm passionate about sharing my knowledge about the things I know. I like to talk about some of the things I'm learning as well, and share and even learn from a lot of others as well. Mr. Lukman has been one of my go-to persons in terms of software development. I know he's well, when we worked together back in Nigeria, is the go-to person really when it comes to anything development. So it's an honor for me to be here today and talk about what I'm also learning in the security space. So to get started, just to do a quick of history lesson. I'm sure we're probably all familiar with, well, I'm assuming a lot of us here are technical people, so I'm guessing that we are all familiar with the conventional software development model, right? Which is the most popular one is the waterfall model. So pretty much what you do in the waterfall model is you collect the requirement from your customers, your business, or whatever. You design it, you develop it, you test it, you deploy it, and then you continue maintaining. Now, the good thing about, even though this has been a very effective model for a very long time, so a lot of organizations have used this for years, like decades, and it's been working fine for them. But again, back to the opening statement I started with is, in a modern world where you need to deploy at a very fast pace, do you really think the waterfall model would be able to keep up with that pace? So look at this, for example. You get a requirement from your customers, you design it, you develop it, you test it, you deploy. When you deploy, for example, let's say you've deployed something to your customers and then they come back to you and say, oh, sorry, this waterfall should not be spelled like this, or this is not the way we want the design. We want the buttons to be on the left and not the right. What do you do again? You come back to development, then you develop again, you test. So this is a very slow way of getting things done, right? And that is what has brought about the process, the culture of the agile way of doing things. So which is like the continuous iteration. You're doing things, you're getting the feedback immediately, you're breaking things down into smaller modules, you're doing it, you're getting your feedback, you're reiterating, continuously delivering new services. And then DevOps is even a faster way of doing agile methodology. So we're going to be talking about DevSecOps. Well, I thought I needed to talk a little bit about DevOps before we talk about putting security into DevOps. So in the DevOps world, you'll start by planning, you write your code, you build, you test, you release, you deploy, you operate it, then you monitor, and then it continues. So instead of the waterfall model where it ends, I'm not sure if you can see the point. I'm trying to point to, I'm trying to use a pointer, but hopefully my mouse is doing that for me. So you get to deployment stage, something happens, you go back. Whereas in the DevOps stage, you can see it's all a continuous process. So I'll define DevSecOps quickly. It is a very, very simple. So the goal of DevSecOps is very simple, and the definition is even quite simple as well. It is simply defined as trying to integrate security practices into your DevOps pipeline. So the DevOps pipeline is already there, continuously delivering, continuously building new products. But then you need to ensure you're building those products with adequate security into them. And how do you do this? It's all about the shift left culture. I'm sure a lot of us might have heard this word, the buzzword, a lot of time. It's not actually a buzzword. It is actually very, very important. the whole idea of shifting left. And what it means is you want to bring security left. So let me go back quickly. Initially, when people build application, maybe when Mr. Kenny talks about this, he might have some experience to share. When people build application like this, you know, after the deployment, this is where security comes in. So they finish building the whole application, then they say, oh, now the application is ready, let's test it. And then they get some penetration tester to come in to do the test, and this is not very effective, right? Even though it works, but look at all the amount of effort you've done from this stage to get into the deployment stage. And then that is when someone catches a bug to say, oh, this component you're using is vulnerable, this library that you're using is this. You can see the amount of effort that goes into that and the amount of work. So the goal of DevSecOps is to ensure that security is built in from the scratch. So from the moment you are planning that project, oh, we want to build this website, you're already thinking about security. How do we integrate security into this application we're building? And the key idea is very simple. You're going to be working, collaborating, a lot of collaboration. So that means you're bringing people from development, you're bringing your developers, you're bringing your operations engineer. So those are your cloud engineer themselves, and your security expert. They're all working together to build the application. And the old way used to be the developers would build the application, they hand it over to the systems administrator who would provision the infrastructure, and then they call the security guys to come in to test the application and see if everything is fine. But with DevSecOps, we are bringing it left. So we're bringing, from the moment the developer is writing the first set of code, we are putting in security. And I'm going to talk about how we do all of that in a bit. But before I do that, I'd like to talk about why security is important in DevOps. Why do we need security in DevOps? So I thought this snapshot from the Phoenix project was very good, and that was why I included it. So a company like Amazon, I'm sure we all know Amazon. Amazon deploys 23,000 times a day. So what it means is they are committing to prod like every single day, 23,000 times. And Google is doing over 5,500 times a day. So you can imagine this frequency of deployment. Someone is deploying 23,000 times a day. How do you expect them to work with a model that you test for application after the deployment has been done? You see, there is no way in the world that that kind of process would work for an organization that wants to deploy at this rate. And for you to lead in this present world, you need to be doing things like this. So you need to be continuously improving. You get a feedback from a user, you're not waiting for version 2. So again, the old way used to be, you get a feedback, then you compile them, 6 months later, someone is building version 2, and then after another 3 months of building version 2, you deploy and you collect feedback for another one. You can see there is no way you'd keep up. And in the modern world, working, especially where there are lots of competitors out there, and you need to be on a very fast pace. So it helps you get to the market. It makes your time to market faster. So with DevSecOps, so when you automate security, it helps you reduce the time and effort you require for security testing, and it helps you get to market faster. So because you know all of the old process is automated, all your security checks are going to be done automatically, you are able to deploy and push to production at a very fast pace. Also, improved collaboration is a very important thing. Like I said, in the past, everyone used to work in silos. So the developers would be working on their own. They have their own office somewhere. Your security, your operations guys, your system administrators are also somewhere. Everyone is, so this one would expect their work to finish, send it to this one, then the other one. So that collaboration is, they don't even feel like a team. Everyone is just like, oh, the devs have finished their work, now is our time. It is not the best way to work, right? So that collaboration, everyone coming together, knowing that you're all working for the same goal, makes the whole process better. So putting security in DevOps helps promote that collaboration between the team. And then again, enhancing your security by making sure that you detect vulnerabilities early. So like I said, if you're shifting left, that means from the moment your developer starts writing the code, the moment they open their IDE, VS Code, or whatever they're using, they start practicing secure development. And then it also helps you ensure compliance as well. A lot of us are working in organizations or in industries that are highly highly regulated banking industry, finance industry, healthcare, you can't afford to mess up in this kind of industry. There are loads of fines you're going to pay, right? So you're paying hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds or naira when if for example you lose customer data, someone's able to break into your site and then they're able to steal sensitive data. So you don't want all of this to happen. So you need to ensure you're compliant, and you need to ensure you're getting the right security controls in place to meet this compliance. And lastly is cost saving. So the cost of fixing security is always better than the cost of when something bad happens. So like I was talking about the fines just now, when something bad happens, the reputational damage, the financial damage, you can't even afford. It's better for you to spend the money and buy the tools now than spending the money in courts to settle people that you've lost their data, to pay your regulators, to rebuild your brand after, so these are some of the reasons why it is very important that we put security into our DevOps process. So this is what a typical DevOps pipeline looks like. So you build, obviously you write your code. When your code is written, you build the code. All of this is automated, by the way. So you put it in staging, you check, you deploy to staging, there's a user acceptance test conducted, it is pushed to production. This is provided all of the previous one is passed, it moves to the next one. So this is what a typical DevOps pipeline looks like. Now let's look at what a typical DevSecOps pipeline looks like. So for a DevSecOps pipeline, you start the same way. You're building your code. You do your Artifactory deploy is done, and then the next thing you're doing is you're doing a static analytic security testing. So you're doing a SAST, you're doing a dependency check, you're doing all of this would be done before it is pushed to staging, right? Now, if all of this is passed, it moves to staging, it deploys in staging, the test is done, you do a dust again. So you're doing your, this is the point you're doing your penetration testing. Remember the old ways of doing things in waterfall model where the penetration testing comes when the whole application has been done, right? So you do your dust here, you deploy to production. If this pass, you scan your infrastructure as well, make sure the infrastructure you're building upon is also secure. You do a compliance check. So this is, we're going to show all of this. Hopefully I'm able to show this in the production. I think I have a lab somewhere I can show, and we can see this as well. So the principles of DevSecOps are simple. You're shifting left. So look at this. This is the first point security has started to come in. Imagine instead of bringing security here at the end, so after the application is ready, you now start thinking about security. You shift. This is what we mean when we talk about the shift left approach to things. And then automation is very important. There is no way anyone is going to be able to do this manually. Again, going back to the story of Amazon deploying 23,000 times a day. What do you think is going to be able to review 23,000 commits every day to see if everything checks out? There is no, how many security engineers are you going to employ to check that for you? So it is important that automation is key in this whole process. Collaboration is also very important. We don't work in silos when we're working in DevOps, in the DevOps way of doing things. With the DevOps culture, collaboration is key, from your business analysts to your developers to your security guys to your engineers. Everyone works together. And then continuous monitoring is important. So you need to continuously monitor for feedback, either from your toolings, from your users. You need to always get feedback, and that is what would help you improve the whole process. And then threat modeling is very key, because if you're going to secure something, you need to know where your threat is going to come from, right? So if I'm building an application, the first thing I'm going to do, ideally, in a DevOps or a DevSecOps core way of working, is to understand the threat. So I want to build a website that is going to host people's, people are going to be registering, and it's going to host people's name, address, and everything. What are the things I'm going to think about? I think about the common threats that could happen in that place. So we could have things like what's called brute force attack could happen. Some denial of service attack could happen. Sorry, we could have a DDoS. We could have misconfiguration. We could have information disclosure. So these are all the things you're doing. Your threat and threat modeling. You could use maybe the Stride framework with Microsoft, and there are lots of threat modeling tools out there that would help you you design a network flow diagram, you get an idea of the kind of threat you are exposed to, and then you make sure you're implementing all the controls necessary before you even start writing a line of code. And then immutable infrastructure. So we're using infrastructure as code. That means your infrastructure state is always true, remains the same. Someone doesn't go in to just change something randomly. So you know your infrastructure would always remain in the same state as long as no changes are made, and all changes are going to be tracked. So that is why you also need to use a good version control system. A lot of us use Git. Git is one of the most popular distributed version control systems out there. So you could use anyone, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, anyone that works for you. And then moving forward, so now talking about how we implement devs, how to implement DevSecOps, there are loads of steps and stages we implement security into our development pipeline. But the first place you would ideally is where in your IDE. So because when someone is writing a code, where do they start from? After a threat modeling is done, the first thing a developer would do is to open their laptops, spin up the VS Code of whatever platform they're using, and then they start writing. So you want to be able to ensure that you start reducing vulnerabilities from that point. And how do you do this? You do this by integrating security toolings like IDE plugins or pre-commit hook before they are able to push to a central repository. So I'll talk about the two quickly. The IDE plugins are security toolings that you integrate into a developer's machine, onto a developer's machine, and their IDE environment they're using to write the code, that continuously tries to look for either vulnerabilities in whatever the developer is writing, or if they are using some open source codes or libraries that is vulnerable, it starts to underline them. Or you know the way you'd get this when you spell something wrong in Microsoft Word, you get the red underlining, that red line underneath, right? So the same way you would get that from the code you are writing. And some of the most popular tools in this space, Snake is actually a very good one. I use Snake for myself, but there are lots of other ones. There's SolarNint, there is Checkmarks, there's a lot of them that does this for IDE plugin. So you put this when a developer is writing a code, for example, and they mistakenly or intentionally put a secret. So they've exposed a key, maybe an API key or a DB key in their code. It would flag it for them, right? It could, like I said, it could be unintentional, like maybe they just get carried away and then they instead of using a variable to point to the code or using a secret manager, they just put the code in the code, they put the key like that. So things like this would ensure all of those are flagged before they even try to push that code to a central repository to merge with the other codes that have been written by other people. So you can see the first stage is, at this stage, if for example a developer was going to put in about say 70 different errors into, would have merged say up to 70 different vulnerabilities into the production code or into Git, using a IDE plugin could help reduce this maybe up to 60 to 70% and flag it down a lot. So a lot of those, they've used the vulnerable component, they've used the library that is outdated, something, all of that would have been flagged and they would change it even before they merge the code. Now, another thing to implement here is the commit hooks. So you're saying before someone can push their code, he has to check, some things have to check out. So the pre-commit hooks would, Git hook is a very popular one. This is what I use myself. It would scan for certain things. So for example, you could set up a pre-commit hook to look for secrets in a code that are about to be committed to a repository. So you'd say it could use a lot of parts. So it could use pattern matching. It could use it could use a lot of ways to identify these things, right? So when the developers finish writing their code, before they are able to say git push, git do this, do that, they have to, sorry, one sec. Okay, before they are able to push that code to a central repository, some checks need to be passed before the code will be allowed to push. So you integrate pre-commit hook, you put all the requirements you want. So you're saying the code must be this must be this must be that, and then once all of that checks out, they will be able to push. So this way, again, you've reduced the amount of vulnerabilities that would get into your central repository. Now, when Another very important thing, the second stage really is doing a software composition analysis. Um, Sorry, someone saying something. Okay, a software composition analysis is a tool that you use to analyze open source libraries or third-party dependencies you're using in your tool. So a lot of developers, a lot of us, I'm not a developer, but I do use it sometimes as well. Not sometimes, all the time. We use a lot of open source libraries because we can't be bothered to, write and build everything on our own. So but these open source libraries, because they are open source, they are not actively maintained, right? No one is actively looking at them to ensure they are up to date, vulnerabilities are fixed. And when we use these open source libraries, we could be bringing in vulnerabilities into our own application we're building, right? So if an open source library has certain vulnerabilities and you've used it in your own almost perfect application, you would still that you're still integrating that flaw into your own system, right? So you use tools like GitLab does software composition analysis. Sneak is a very, very versatile tool. It does SCA for you. There are other tools like Retire.js, there's Safety that you could use for SCA, and it would help you identify all the open source libraries you've used in your code and tell you the ones that are vulnerable, the ones that needs to be changed, and you get all of that. Now you could integrate a quality gate here to ensure that it doesn't pass through if, say, for example, vulnerabilities that are rated critical or high are found. So you could decide to say, you know what, our risk appetite is quite low. We would allow uh, open source libraries that have vulnerabilities that are low or say medium, but anything high and critical will not get through. So the code will not successfully, you won't be able to get past this stage. So if your SCA detects those, you will not be able to build that code, and then someone would need to fix them before you're able to build. So moving forward to security application, static application security testing. So this is our SAT, and this is where we test the code without executing it. So we're able to detect vulnerabilities early in our development cycle by doing this, and we're able to identify issues as quickly as possible. So issues like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, we could identify all of this using our SAST. And we have lots of tools that does this again. Snake does this, SonarCube does this. We have Fortify, we have lots of tools out there. It is up to you or the organization to decide what tool they want to work with for their SaaS. So the same goes for the dynamic application testing. So this is when you test an application simulating a runtime. So you're testing an application for vulnerabilities by simulating different attacks. So it tries to break the application the same way a penetration tester would try to use different techniques, tactics, and procedures to break an application. You have tools like OWASP, ZAP, Group that would try to do the same and see if they're able to break the application before. So these are tools that does that. ZAP OWASP is a very popular one. AppCheck is also very popular as well. Nikto, they are all very good tools that would help you identify vulnerabilities in a live environment, and then they would help you ensure that your application is secure in production. So when you implement that, you also remember, we're building all of these things using automation, right? So we're not doing ClickUps. So our infrastructure itself is built using IAC, so infrastructure as code. We're using all tools like Terraform, Ansible, Chef, Puppet, CloudFormation for AWS, ARM template for Azure, and all of these things as well could have vulnerabilities in them. So you could build an application, and you could mistakenly leave your S3 bucket open to the public. You could mistakenly allow ports that shouldn't be open to be accessible from the internet. So there are lots of things and lots of ways we could misconfigure or introduce vulnerabilities even into our infrastructure itself. So tools like Chekhov, Terrascan would help you do this. Snake again does infrastructure as code, so it would help you ensure that it scans your infrastructure configuration before you start using it to build new application, new systems or new deployment environment. So once you've done that, you'd also integrate continuous monitoring and threat detection. So it is important that you continuously getting feedback, like I mentioned earlier. So you're using tools like Prometheus and Grafana to get analytics out of your, to get analytics data out of your application. How is it performing? What's the, and your infrastructure as well. So you get all this data, and when something goes wrong, so your CPU usage is going high, your RAM is running out, your memory or something is going wrong, you're continuously getting this data and you're getting real-time feedback. So you set metrics to say, alert me when this gets to this. So for example, CPU usage has gotten to 75%. You'd want to be worried, right? Do you need to scale out? Is something going wrong? Are we getting attacked? So all these feedbacks are coming in, and then you're able to get real-time information so you can proactively implement controls that would help you resolve those things. So continuous monitoring and threat detection is the last and the most, also a very important part of DevSecOps in implementing security into our pipeline. So it helps us detect and respond to threat in real time, like I've mentioned. It also helps us provide visibility into the security posture of our production environment. And lastly, it helps us ensure compliance with regulatory requirements. So these are some of the things we build in or integrate into our development pipelines, and all of these again are automated. So it makes it easier for an organization that is committing 10,000 times a day. You can see all of these things could easily be done. Run, the scans are automated, they pass, 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 pass. If something doesn't pass, someone has to raise an alert, someone looks at it, fixes it, and then so it's, you're able to get to market faster because you're able to push more codes in a day. So I think this is the point where I will try to show a quick demo, and just bear with me 1 second. I need to, uh, can you let me know if you can still see my screen, please? So we're going to be, what I'm doing is so we have this, we've built, well, not that we've built, this is an open source. So what I've done is I have this Netflix clone that I'm going to be using today. And I think we can all, let me use the charts. So this is just for this. After this, it will be up. So this is the site. You can see it's up and running now. So we're gonna redeploy this same app. We're gonna make some changes to the app. We're gonna redeploy the app, and then you would see how effective it can be to practice DevSecOps. So imagine a company like Netflix, right? You're building an app that millions of people are using. Always uptime, availability is key. You have to ensure your app is up and running all the time, right? So we're going to just I'm going to show you what my pipeline looks like for this app. It is not the most robust one, but I've used Jenkins for my CI/CD in this case, and so what we've 1 sec. Again, this is just a lab, so don't worry about the password I've used. No, I wouldn't use this in a production environment. So okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop because this is running right now. That's why if you can access the link I've just sent in the chat, that's why. So we're going to stop this container. So we have this container running. We're going to stop this container. And then we're going to try to build it again. But like I said, it might take some time, right? So if it takes some time, it might be a good time for me to start answering questions while we build it again.
Exactly.
So I'll just walk you through
Mr.
before.
Amin. Mr. Amin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to tell you that we have you have actually exhausted
Oh yeah, I've
your time
exhausted
for
my time.
so
Oh
while you're building, we can be taking questions.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to walk you through what my typical what the pipeline looks like and what it does. So I should probably just copy this out for you to see. But what I'm doing here is So I install all the tools I need for the application to be able to run, because I'm building this in a Docker. I'm building this as a Docker container, right? I'm deploying the application as a container. So I'm using JDK 17. I'm using Node 16. The environment I'm using some tools for security like Sonar Scanner. So I'm going to check out my code. The code is in my repository. This is the code for the Netflix application itself. So because I've stopped it, if you refresh this, you should see that you should not be able to reach it again, right? The application is stopped working now. So you should also not be able to see the application again. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, where is it? We're going to rebuild this, but just to do a very fast walkthrough of what we have here. So once the code is checked out from Git, it does a quick analysis using SonarQube. I have the SonarQube somewhere as well. So just I can open the 20. I think SonarQube is on port 9000. So this is my SonarQube. Okay. Nope. So where is it? So it runs a scan on SonarQube, and then there's a quality gate here, making sure the report of SonarQube determines whether it moves to the next one or not. But I've decided not to abort the pipeline if SonarQube finds issues. So even if issues are found, it wouldn't abort again, because this is just for testing purposes and this is just for demonstration purposes. Depending on the organization, you might decide to fill this place and say abort pipeline through if you find issues that are maybe high severity or something here. But I haven't found anything like that, so I don't need to worry. So you can see it passed my check when I run the. So there are some issues again still that I need to fix, but a lot of them are not very serious. Okay, so we install our dependencies, npm. We're going to be using npm. Then I'm also going to be using OAuth for the Dast scan. I'm going to be using Trivy as well. I'm going to be building on Docker, like I've mentioned. I'm pushing to my Docker hub again, because this is a development and lab purpose. I wanted to show how effective the security toolings are. So I've intentionally put a key here, which is wrong, which is not a good practice to do. Yeah.
1 minute, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, participants. Sorry. Please, let's use the Q&A session from the activity session to ask our questions. So you have a session there, so we would, attend to the questions that we have in there. Please use that session, use that panel. If you are struggling to find it, it's towards the bottom right. We have one triangle at the top like this beside the chat. You have that guy there. Please use it to ask your question. We want to use that. We want to quickly manage our time as much as possible. All right, Mr. Amin, proceed.
Yeah. Hold on. I don't know why something is wrong. Looks like everything is frozen. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. I think when you took over, everything went kaboom. Okay, 1 sec. You should be back now. Okay, so I'm using Trivy to scan my container. So again, another good practice is when you eventually build, when you have codes in it, when you have images that you're going to be using to build containers, you should always ensure they are secure. So you're scanning them. I'm using Trivy here to scan, and then we'll deploy it to my Docker hub once everything checks out, and that is the application we're going to give to the public. So let's see how this would work in an environment. Why is this freezing now? Okay, can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm going to build this. Let's save and apply, and then we're going to build again and see. Okay, so it has started building. So you can see the build is in progress. I've clicked it twice. I need to cancel one. So yeah, are the questions coming in now? So while we wait, let me show you the stages so you can see how what is happening. So this is the build we are using, build 31. So it's checked the code out from Git. So for example, a developer has made some changes to the code. They've pushed it to GitHub, and then we set up the Jenkins to to run a new build every time it identifies that a new code has been, so there is a new commit. For every time there's a commit, it does a new build, right? So it has cleaned up the workspace. It's checking the code out from Git. SonarQube is doing its analysis, and then we should see a report here soon. A report should be here already if the SonarQube analysis is done. So when that happens, we're going to where is it, project? So the Netflix project, you can see it says 55 seconds ago, because this is just done now. There are no vulnerabilities and all of that. You get all the report about everything you are doing pretty much, and it continues. Now it's doing its OAuth app. It's done its dependency check, and you can get an idea of what is happening here as well. It's installed npm, it's installed node 16, jdk 17, all the dependencies you need for the application to run. So yeah, where are the questions? Let me
Okay, all right. So let me take
look
them.
at
Let me
them.
take them. So the first
Oh,
question
one sec.
was asked appropriately in the right place where. So they said, would you share the slides after the presentation? Yes. Let me answer on your behalf. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so the second one was asked in the on chat. So if you are struggling to ask from that Q&A session, you can actually also ask using the chat session as well. So
Okay.
Mr. Ridwan asks, how do we do this DevSecOps in mobile application that uses Firebase as backend?
In a mobile application that uses Firebase as backend. So I'm assuming that whatever application you're building, you would still follow the same process. So you would have your code somewhere. You would write your code in you would be using a version control system for your code, right? So you would do all of these things before it gets there. So from the moment, remember, the code makes the application, right? And what you're trying to secure is you're trying to make sure the code that is going to that's going to build the application is secured. So if you have done, if you're doing your software composition analysis, all of this would be done before if before your application is, say, deployed, or before your application goes to prod. So you're doing your software composition analysis, you're doing your static test, you're doing your dynamic test. The infrastructure you're building it on is also being scanned for vulnerabilities. So I don't know very well. I don't know how Firebase works in terms of, but I'm sure the typical process for software development is what you'd follow there. I know some of my colleagues use Firebase, and they use it for things like collecting data and stuff. But unless unless I'm missing something, again, I'm not a software developer, but you would be building typically following the same software development lifecycle that I've shown in the past, and then you can do all of these things irrespective of whatever platform or where you're building on.
All right, thank you, Mr. Amin. So if I can add to that, being a
Yeah.
developer as well and being someone that has used Firebase, different products from Firebase. Firebase has a lot of products. So what the questionnaire asked, I think the answers were succinct, but just to expand to that so that the developer who asks the question can understand is that what Mr. Amin said is not specific to any kind of, whether it's only for front end or back end or mobile application. So for all developments, all development types, whether whichever platforms you are building for, they need to be checked for vulnerability before they get to where they would eventually live. So what we are doing here is to ensure that all security checks are done before they get to the main branch that gets deployed to the production. So for instance, if you're building and you have your Firebase backend, if your Firebase backend, most people, what they do with Firebase backend is just calling pretty much JSON as defined in the Firebase. That in itself can be a huge vulnerability, but let's keep it as that. So if you're building, and let's say this Firebase is secured, and we trust Google who handles the Firebase. Your own is in your own applications. How do you keep the keys that you're using to access the Firebase? Mr. Amin has mentioned that we shouldn't keep the keys bare. So there's a way we manage keys. So all sort of things needs to be checked to ensure that we are not exposing our house as we build,
Yeah.
as we push to the production. So what we need to do is, I think in the next session we are also going to talk about a couple things in that light. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a little bit on top of that as well, secret management is actually one of the very important things that causes some of the biggest attacks we've seen recently. So, just a couple of days ago, I was reading that DeepSeek, the new AI from China, has they're currently undergoing some cyber attack right now, and
Yeah.
that's because the researchers have seen that they mistakenly exposed certain keys to certain DBs in their code that is now causing them a lot of problems. So you do all of these things like the static test, the pre-commit hooks would ensure that you don't mistakenly do this. So I'm sure no one in their right sense would want to do that intentionally, but it could happen as a mistake, and then things like this would help you prevent that from happening. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Okay,
Do we have another one?
Another question. Can someone become a DevSecOps expert without learning all the development and networking concept?
Without that's the truth. If you don't learn development, you have to learn. So two ways, at least from what I've seen from my experience. As for me, I started out, I'm not a developer, I've never been a developer. I started out as a network engineer and then security engineer to cloud security application. And so I came from the operation side. So remember, DevOps is a combination of two things, development and operation. So meeting at the middle is where DevOps happens. You could come from development to DevOps, you could come from operations to DevOps. The whole goal is everyone's able to work together. So when you say not learning networking, I don't understand what that would look like, but you would definitely need. So for example, I don't need to be a core developer, right, to be able to do my job. I don't need to be able to write codes. I only need to be able to understand what other people have written and then use my own toolings to be able to look out for vulnerabilities. So I don't need to be an expert developer. Doesn't mean I'm not actively trying to also improve my own understanding of how code works or how people write code. Because how would I be able to secure something if I don't understand anything about what they've written, right? So yeah, you could be a DevSecOps person without being a developer. So that means you'd be coming in from the security and operations side of things. So that means, and for you to be a security and operations person, you need to know networking. So unfortunately, I don't think it's possible to do that without knowing both development and that you have to pick one. So either you know development and then you try to learn the security and operations side, or you know the security and operations side and then you try to learn a little bit of development into it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Amin. I hope he answers his questions. So another person asks, since Jenkins is being used in the example,
Yeah.
we can see for development, does it support zero downtime deployment?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. So the only reason I have removed this is because I wanted to show I don't have any high availability setup. So it does support zero downtime deployment where you would deploy 100% without any downtime. Yeah, that a lot of people use Jenkins in their organization, so like enterprise organization using Jenkins. So there are other tools like Azure DevOps, there's GitHub Actions and things, but I chose to use this because number one, it's free, it is easy to use, and then I needed to show something quickly as possible. So yeah, you can use it for zero downtime deployment. Yeah.
Yeah, Jenkins is one of the best tools ever. So, yeah, it's there. Yeah. So I think we don't have. Okay, what does the life of a DevSecOps expert looks like? Hey, some people are asking questions.
So it's always differs. As a DevSecOps person, again, your job is to ensure that whatever application is being built that is going to get out there, it is designed, built, implemented, monitored in the most secured and efficient way. So your job is to ensure that I don't know how to put this, but you're doing a lot of stuff like you're doing threat modeling. You want to, again, I mentioned this before, you need to understand the threats that are going to be your application is exposed to. when you do your threat modeling, you identify the threat, then you give a feedback to you as a security architect. You then design security controls that would fix those threats you've identified. So if, for example, you've identified that a possible threat is information disclosure, unauthorized information disclosure, what do? You implement encryption. You ensure that if you have access control, you implement identity and access management. How do you control people coming into people getting access? You need to ensure unique identities, multi-factor authentication. If you identify a threat of what's it called, denial of service attack, DDoS, what do? You put a web firewall, web application firewall. So as you identify this threat, there are also corresponding controls that are going to be put in. So that's part of your job as a DevSecOps person. You'd also get report from this tool. So okay, you can see our deployment is now complete. It has deployed to a container, and we're going to check that container. So this is my Docker repo. I'm going to do a quick refresh and see. I need to sign back in. I'm going to do a quick refresh and see. So you can see a new image has been deployed less than a minute ago. It's called Alofawi at Netflix. So if I check, the containers that are running now, so you can see a new container is running. And now if you go back to the Netflix application, it should be back up online again. So we've deployed a completely different Netflix app from the one that was running before, right? So this is how fast you are able to deploy. So imagine someone came to me and said, this my list is supposed to be here, not here. And in the old ways of doing things, you'd want to go back, do your requirement gathering, do this, see how fast you're able to so this is why it is possible for organizations to be able to do this 23,000 times a day, because the whole process is automated. All the security checks are done. I've done my DAST, I've done my SAST, I've done my software composition analysis, I've done my image scan. All of these things within how many minutes? How long did the whole, let's see, how long did the whole pipeline take to build? 12 minutes, right? This is actually very slow, which is bad. You need to find ways to even bring this down. So this is where reliability comes in. SREs are always trying to ensure what are the ways we can be more efficient. How do we cut down the time of doing this? Time to production. Again, remember I talked about first to market, right? So this 12 minutes, if your competitor is doing this so you are Netflix and there's another one, Apple TV. If Netflix is doing this in 12 minutes and Apple TV is doing it in 7 minutes, who do you think would have a better product, right? So it is always very important to even find more effective ways and more efficient ways to run that. So the app is running. Let's test it and see it's built. Any other question? Just checking the app.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we have actually
So
we have gone beyond our
that's
time, and
okay.
yeah.
Good. So all of this is built on Azure. Again, you can see it's all automated. You deploy your resources using infrastructure as code, whatever tooling you like. Azure uses ARM templates. I use Terraform for this. You could use anything. Again, it's all up to you. You get your result from the scans. You action them. You build, continuously improving. So that is pretty much what I wanted to share with you guys today. I hope you've been able to learn a thing or two from this. And hopefully, if you're working in organizations that are building apps, enterprise applications, you might want to start looking at ways of integrating security into your pipelines and start considering DevOps and DevSecOps practices as a culture. So DevOps as a culture is not a project, it's not a tooling, it is something you have to embrace. So it is a completely different way of working, right? So agile, fast, continuous feedback, collaboration, these are all the things that comes in when you start working in a DevOps culture. So thank you very much, everyone. It's been a wonderful time. I've spent exactly 1 hour. And since there are no questions, I would hand over to Mr. Lukman to take you guys through the next section.
Thank
Cheers
you,
all.
thank you very much, Mister. I mean, it's been a pleasure. It's an eye opener for a lot of us. I believe that a lot of message has been passed. There's a lot to chew. There's a lot to chew right here. Um, First is to ensure that we have automation in our development. This is a world we are in the world of scale, so it's all on who can scale faster. So if you are in a competition of Gemini versus ChatGPT versus DeepSeek, so you're in a race, and then if you're not fast enough, you'll be left out. And then if you're even fast, but your whatever you're deploying is a junk, is not secured, you are even in more problem. As good as the DeepSeek that people are saying is, they got attacked just like Mr. Amin said in the early hours of their deployments, and their things got stuck. Pretty much they are fast enough and they're able to turn things around, so they are back in production. So, but they're still getting attacked and all of that. So uh, the bigger you are, the more attacks you get, and of course, if you are not careful, you are going to be thrown out. People want to throw you out of business, and the least you can do is to make it easy for them to throw you out of business. Thank you very much, Mr. Amin, for that session. It's been very good. We look forward to having more of you in our subsequent sessions. Thank you very much. Mr. Amin would be with us a bit, but he has other sessions that he has. But I think in the interim he's still with us, but he can leave
Sorry.
anytime.
Yeah, Mr. Yeah, sorry guys. I might have to leave soon, so I do have other commitments. But again, if you want to reach out to me, it's I put my X handle on the chat. It's X at Alofawi, so you can reach out to me via X, as formerly known as Twitter. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. Cheers. Bye.
All right, yeah. So we are going to share his handles, so you can follow him up to get more, hands-on advice. So the next line of action is a product spotlight.